Resting stone. The bell above the door jangled as I stepped into the pub. My boots left ruddy prints on the floorboards, that distinctive red clay you only find in this part of Yorkshire. I couldn't quite remember where I'd been walking. 6 hours until Lily's birthday party. I'd promised I wouldn't miss this one. The rain was coming down like Judgment Day outside, and I'd pulled over to wait it out. 20 minutes, maybe 30, and I'd be back on the road. The Disney princess doll was still safely buckled into my back seat, waiting to make a 7-year-old's eyes light up. The place smelled of beer and wood smoke and something underneath, something that reminded me of my grandfather's coat closet, where old wool collected the scent of mothballs and memories. 4 locals hunched at a corner table, playing dominoes with the grim concentration of men performing surgery. Old-timers by the cut of them, the kind who've been sitting in the same chairs since Churchill was in diapers. The broadest of them, red-faced, with gnarled hands like twisted roots, slammed down a tile with triumphant force. "And that's how it's done, you sorry lot," he announced in a voice roughened by decades of what I guessed was pipe tobacco. "Shot it, Harold," muttered the man to his left, lean as a whippet with coal-black eyes that contrasted sharply with his shock of white hair. "One lucky play doesn't make you the bloody king." The third, Doyle, by the anchor tattoo visible on his wrist, had the weathered complexion of a man who'd spent his life at sea. The fourth, easily the oldest, with a face like aged parchment, studied his tiles with the intensity of a chess grandmaster. The pub's ancient jukebox in the corner played Blue Oyster Cult's "Don't Fear the Reaper," but it kept cutting in and out as if the wiring was faulty. Nobody seemed to notice or care. I found myself straining to hear the cowbell section that had become such a cultural reference point, but it never quite reached that part before skipping. The bartender glanced up from where he was arranging glasses in some private pattern only he understood. Tall man, raw-boned, with hands like gnarled tree roots. His face had the topography of the moors outside, weathered by wind and worry, into something that belonged on the land itself. "Help you?" 2 words, but they carried the Yorkshire dales in them, rounded vowels worn smooth as river stones. Whatever's dark. I settled onto a stool with a patched leather seat that sighed beneath me like it was relieving a burden, then reached for my cigarettes, my road ritual. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. By day, I calculated risk factors down to the 4th decimal place, while each evening I deliberately inhaled known carcinogens. At home, I wouldn't dream of it. Not with Lily's asthma, not with what I knew about second-hand smoke risk factors. But alone in the car or in anonymous pubs like this, it was the one risk I allowed myself, the small rebellion against my own better judgment. Perhaps the one way I punished myself for the nature of my work. My fingers found the pack, comfortingly solid. "Mind if I asked the bartender, holding them up. He gestured to a weathered tin ashtray, already flecked with ash. "Suit yourself." As I lit up, the familiar burn filled my lungs, the small rush of nicotine steadying my hands. Just this one smoke, then back on the road. Lily was waiting. The radiator in the corner made a sound like someone trying to breathe through a mouthful of marbles. I glanced at it, then did a double take. Hadn't it been green before? Now it was a dull red, like old rust or dried blood. "Something wrong?" Tom asked, following my gaze. "That radiator, I thought it was a different colour." Tom's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Light plays tricks in old places. Outside, the darkness had thickened into something almost tactile, as if the night wasn't just an absence of light, but a presence in itself, something with weight and texture that pressed against the windows like a curious animal. I checked my watch. The face was cracked. When had that happened? The bartender set down a pint without comment, black as old motor oil with a head like dirty snow. I took a sip. It tasted of chocolate and coffee and something metallic that caught at the back of my tongue. "Passing through?" the bartender asked, his Yorkshire accent thick as the beer he'd poured. "Just waiting out the rain," I said, glancing toward the window where droplets scattered against the glass like thrown pebbles. "Need to get back on the road. My daughter's birthday." Roads round here can be treacherous in weather like this, he said, especially the old ones. From the corner, the red-faced domino player, Harold, I'd later learn, looked up from his game. Telling him about the corpse roads, are you, Tom? Wasn't planning to, Tom replied dryly. Corpse roads? I asked, curiosity momentarily displacing my impatience to get back on the road. Aye, that's what folk round here call the old straight paths, Harold explained, turning in his chair to face me. Used to carry the dead along 'em, from the villages too. Don't start him on the old tales, Davies interrupted with a sharp wave of his hand. He'll talk your ear off till sunrise. Nothing wrong with preserving local history. It's not the history they find interesting, Doyle cut in, leaning forward. It's the ghost stories. Ghost stories, I asked, checking my watch again. Lily wouldn't be in bed for hours yet. I had time. Down south they burn their dead fancy. Up on moors we just dig 'em deep and trust the clay to keep 'em, Harold had said, warming to his audience. This whole valley was a battleground during the Wars of the Roses. The clay's red from all the blood it's drunk over the centuries. That's just iron oxide, Davies muttered. Aye, and I suppose it's just the wind that makes the crying sound up on Blackmoor Ridge, Harold challenged. They say on Lammas Eve you can still hear the armies clashing. Load of bollocks, Davies said, but he made a small warding gesture with his left hand as he said it, touching thumb to pinky finger in what I recognised as an old protection sign. Tom set a glass of what looked like whiskey in front of Davies without being asked. You say that, but you still won't drive past Gallows Cross after dark, he observed mildly. Davies shot him a dark look and knocked back the whiskey. Some things a man doesn't need to see twice. What's at Gallows Cross? I asked. The silence that followed my question hung in the air like smoke in a sealed room, thick enough to choke on. Nothing worth seeing, Tom said finally, polishing a glass with slow, methodical movements, and fewer things worth discussing. The bell above the door jangled, but no one entered. Bloody thing's been doing that all day, the bartender said, watching me watch the door. Needs fixing. Or an exorcism, I muttered. Wouldn't work. Some things you can't pray away. I nodded like this was perfectly reasonable bartender philosophy. The place was called the Wayfarer's Rest, according to the ancient sign I'd spotted hanging outside, its paint cracked and peeling like a bad sunburn. Inside, everything looked like it had been there since the Middle Ages, including the clientele. The walls were stone, uneven and black in places from centuries of smoke. The ceiling beams sagged in the middle like tired shoulders. You're not from round here, the bartender observed. Not a question. That obvious? We don't get many strangers this time of year. He picked up a glass, held it to the light like a jeweller examining a suspect diamond. Not on the old road, anyway. Is there a new one? Motorway. Bypassed us 20 years back. He set the glass down with the precision of a man who knows exactly how much force things will bear before breaking. Only ones who take the old road now are locals. And the lost. The chill that had followed me inside settled at the base of my spine. I'm not lost, I said, more to myself than to him. Just passing through. Course you are, he nodded. Everyone is. The bell jangled again, longer this time, like someone was deliberately pulling the cord. Christ, I muttered. That's getting old. Bothers you, does it? Wouldn't it bother anyone? Some don't notice after a while. Others never stop hearing it. Tom's smile was brief and cold as a December sunrise. You got a name? Daniel, I said, then frowned. Had that hesitation been noticeable? I'm Tom. He didn't offer a hand, though most round here just call me Keeper. Of the bar, that twitch again, among other things. The domino players erupted in a brief flurry of Yorkshire dialect too thick and rapid for me to follow. One slammed down a tile, with all the finality of a judge's gavel. Then they settled back into silence, like clockwork figures who'd completed their programmed movement. What brings you to our little corner of nowhere, Daniel? Tom asked, pronouncing my name like he was trying it on for size and finding it didn't quite fit. I opened my mouth to answer, but the details slipped away like minnows in a fast stream. Work, I said finally. It seemed safe enough. What sort? Insurance. The word came automatically, though it felt wrong somehow. Family, Tom asked, pouring another drink I hadn't ordered. The question landed like a stone in still water. Wife, daughter, though sometimes I wonder if they'd notice if I trailed off, surprised by my own honesty. Sarah says I'm more married to my territory than to her. Hard to argue when I'm gone 5 days out of 7. I took another drag, watched the smoke curl toward the ceiling beams. Lily, my daughter, she drew a family picture for school last month, drew me standing outside the house, suitcase in hand. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Should have gone into something local, accounting maybe. Dangerous business, insurance, Tom said with surprising gravity. Dangerous. Putting a price on disaster, on death. He shook his head. Makes a man think too much about odds. I almost laughed. He wasn't wrong. 12 years as a corporate insurance investigator had shown me exactly how companies calculated the worth of a human life. The algebraic formula we used, the one that determined whether a recall would happen or grieving families would simply receive settlement checks, was cold as a morgue table. You have no idea, I muttered, reaching for another cigarette. Last month I recommended against recalling a water heater model with a faulty pressure valve. Insufficient incident rate to justify wholesale replacement, I wrote in my report. 3 people died the following week when their units exploded. But the math worked out, the settlements were cheaper than the recall. I lit the cigarette with hands that weren't quite steady. And tomorrow I'll be back in the office, running the same calculations on a new case. A memory surfaced, driving too fast on a rain-slick road, the flash of headlights, the screech of tyres. I pushed it away. The bell jangled again, and this time the sound scraped along my nerves like fingernails on slate. Jesus fucking Christ, I snapped, slamming my glass down. Beer sloshed over my fingers, cold, then warm, then cold again in the pub's uneven heating. Sorry about that, Tom said. Not sounding sorry at all, he tossed me a bar towel. Old buildings have their own ways. I wiped my hand. The towel felt rough as cat's tongue. You ever think of, I don't know, fixing it? What makes you think it's broken? He cocked his head. Did you know church bells used to ring when they carried the dead to burial? Not just to announce another poor soul had clocked out, but to warn off whatever might be drawn to fresh death, like sharks to blood in the water. I stared at him. The conversational left turn was so abrupt it gave me mental whiplash. That's cheerful. Yorkshire's many things. Cheerful ain't one of them. Tom refilled my glass, though I couldn't remember finishing it. You know why this pub's called the Wayfarer's Rest? I glanced around, noticing for the first time the old map mounted on the wall behind me. Yellowed with age, its edges curling like dried leaves. It showed the surrounding countryside, with the village marked by a small cross. From it, lines radiated outward like a spider's web, or like arteries from a heart. Something to do with those? I nodded toward the map. His eyebrows lifted fractionally. Sharp eye. Most don't notice that old thing. What are they? Trade routes? Close. He leaned on the bar, forearms corded with muscle that spoke of labour far more demanding than pulling pints. We called them corpse roads. The name sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the pub's erratic heating. Corpse roads, I repeated, voice steadier than I felt. Aye. Back when folk still feared God and tax collectors in that order, dying wasn't just sad, it was a bloody logistics problem. Despite myself, I was curious. How so? Most villages weren't important enough to have their own graveyards, Tom continued, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality. Church wouldn't allow it. Needed to keep the resurrection business centralised, see? The lights in the pub dimmed momentarily, then brightened again. No one else seemed to notice. So if your number came up, Tom continued, you didn't get driven to some fancy funeral home in a Rolls Royce. You got carried, on shoulders, sometimes for miles. The sailor-looking man at the domino table snorted. Tell him about Mason's boy, Tom. The one who tried shortcutting across the old path. We're getting to that, Doyle, Tom replied without looking over. Patience was never your strong suit, was it? Never, Doyle said with a wink that seemed meant for me, though I couldn't understand why it sent a chill down my spine. Speaking of which, my glass has been empty for a lifetime, Tom. I looked again at the map, seeing the lines with new understanding. So those are funeral routes? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Got it in one. Tom tapped his temple. Sharp, told you. The bell jangled violently, and I flinched so hard I nearly fell off my stool. As I steadied myself, I noticed Harold at the domino table. He was staring directly at me, but when our eyes met, he deliberately turned back to his game. Had he been watching me the whole time? I studied the map again, while Tom poured another drink for Doyle. The lines seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't focusing directly on them, like veins pulsing beneath skin, and there was something new. Small X marks at intervals along each road. I hadn't noticed those before. What are the X's? I asked when Tom returned. He peered at the map, frowning slightly. What X's? I pointed, but when I looked again, they were gone. Just the straight lines remained, radiating outward like dark sunbeams. Huh, never mind. Tired eyes, I guess. These corpse roads, Tom continued as if nothing had happened, had a peculiar feature. Know what it was? I shook my head, suddenly not wanting to hear the answer but unable to stop myself from asking, what? They ran straight as a ruler, dead straight, if you'll pardon the pun. He traced a line on the bar top with one gnarled finger. Even if it meant cutting through hills, crossing marshes, the route never deviated. Behind me, one of the domino players whispered something, and the others fell silent. I turned, but they were hunched over their game, not looking up. The tiles on the table, hadn't they been ivory-coloured before? Now they looked black as coal. You're imagining things. Focus. This is just a strange pub with strange locales. Seems inefficient, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Oh, it was. But fear'll make men do strange things. Tom straightened. See, they believed spirits could only travel in straight lines, couldn't navigate curves or corners, so these paths had to be direct, a clean shot from deathbed to grave. I thought of the road I'd travelled to reach the pub, how it cut across the landscape like a surveyor's rule, ignoring the natural contours of the land. A chill bloomed in my chest. Just a superstition, I said, more to reassure myself than to argue. Is it now? Tom's voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. The domino players had gone silent, their game forgotten. For a moment, just a flicker, like a frame spliced into a film reel, I saw them differently. Harold's ruddy face darkened to purple, his eyes bulging, one hand clutching at his collar, as if fighting for air. The whippet-thin man beside him appeared blackened, his white hair singed away, skin cracked and blistered with horrific burns, coal dust embedded in the wounds. Doyle's sailor's complexion was bloated and blue-white, his clothes heavy with phantom water, seaweed tangled in his hair and small crabs scuttling from his sleeve across the table. And the oldest one, a parchment-faced man, sat with half his skull caved in, one eye dangling by a thread of tissue, brain matter glistening wetly in the pub's dim light. I blinked, and they were normal again, but the old man was watching me with an expression that might have been pity. Don't push him, Tom, the old man said softly. Let him come to it natural-like. Come to what? I demanded, a thin edge of panic in my voice. Tom ignored me. That road that brought you here, the long straight one that cuts through Harley's field and up over Blackmoor, used to bend round the hill once upon a time, more scenic that way. Then about 300 years back, the parish straightened it. For better traffic flow? My attempt at humour fell dead between us. For more efficient transport, Tom corrected, of a very specific kind. The bell jangled again, steadily, rhythmically, like a code or a summons. See, corpse roads became something special over time, Tom continued, his eyes never leaving mine. Folk believed each body that travelled the route left a trace behind, a spiritual residue, like a groove worn deeper with each passing. My head had begun to throb. The pub seemed both too warm and too cold at once, as if the temperature couldn't decide which way to fall. From the corner, The jukebox rendition of Don't Fear the Reaper cut in and out, the lyrics about seasons not fearing the Reaper fading into static before returning with unnerving clarity. "Would you turn that damn song off?" I snapped, the fraying edges of my nerves finally giving way. "It's been skipping for an hour." Tom didn't even glance toward the jukebox. "Some things can't be turned off, Daniel. They just need to be heard." He leaned closer across the bar. "Tell me something. How exactly did you come to our village today?" "Drove," I said automatically, but even as the word left my mouth I frowned. Had I driven? I remembered walking, but from where? "You sure about that?" Tom made a small sound in his throat, not quite a laugh. "Memory," he said, setting another full pint in front of me, though I couldn't remember finishing the last. "Slippery as a wet fish, innit? Here 1 second, gone the next." When had I finished my drink? I looked down at the fresh pint, amber and inviting with its collar of foam, then back up at Tom. Had his eyes always been that pale? The rain outside had changed, not louder, but sharper somehow, each drop striking the ancient windows with the deliberate precision of fingers tapping on a coffin lid. The pub seemed to exhale around me, the walls moving almost imperceptibly outward before drawing back in. Something skittered across the back of my hand. I glanced down to see a tiny crab, no bigger than a thumbnail, its wet shell glistening under the bar lights. I jerked my hand away, sending my glass wobbling. "You all right there?" Tom asked. I looked up at him, and in that exact moment, thunder cracked so close it seemed to split the air inside the pub. The lights flickered, once, twice, and in that stuttering darkness Tom's face changed. It wasn't his face at all. The skin had gone greenish black at the edges, taut over the cheekbones where the flesh had already begun to rot away. The neck bulged with swellings like plums beneath the skin. But it was the eyes that froze me, clouded and ancient, looking at me from across 600 years of death. Then the light steadied, and it was just Tom again, watching me with something that might have been concern if it didn't look so much like hunger. My stomach rolled over with the slow, nauseating deliberation of a corpse turning in its grave. The room had gone cold, not the honest cold of a drafty old building, but the kind that seeps into your bones and stays there, the kind that makes you wonder if you'll ever be warm again. "You were saying about the old roads," I managed, my voice sounding thin and far away in my own ears. "Parish records from 1742, Tom continued, his voice soft as falling snow. "Tell of a farmer who built a fence across the old corpse road. Within a season, his cattle developed growths like cauliflowers, his crops withered in the field, and his young son began having conversations with empty chairs at supper." "Let me guess," I said, mouth dry. "The fence came down." Like it had caught fire from below. Problem stopped the next day. The domino players had abandoned all pretense of their game. They watched us with the stillness of prey animals, trying not to attract a predator's attention. There were special markers along these routes, Tom continued, called resting stones. Places where the pallbearers would set down their burden, catch their breath, maybe take a drink. My glass was empty again. I couldn't remember finishing it. "Over time," Tom said, refilling it without being asked, "these stones changed. Constant exposure to death does things to matter, to places, creates somewhere that's neither here nor there." "Liminal spaces," I whispered, the academic term surfacing from some forgotten lecture hall. "Fancy word for it, but He nodded, something like approval in his eyes. "Thing is, these resting stones don't look the same to everyone who sees them. To the living, just a slab of rock with a hollow worn in the middle. Coffin-shaped." The chill in my chest had spread to my limbs. "And to the dead?" His smile was gentle now, pitying. "Could be anything. A garden, a crossroads." He gestured around us. "Even a pub." The room seemed to contract, then expand, like it was breathing. The walls rippled slightly, as if I was seeing them through heat haze or rising water. The bell was ringing continuously now, the sound filling the pub like floodwater. "You're saying I couldn't finish." "In transit," Tom supplied, "like everyone who passes through here." "I don't remember dying," I whispered. "Few do, first time through." The mind protects itself. Tom's eyes, ancient, knowing, held mine. It's why we have places like this, waypoints, somewhere to sit a spell, have a drink, come to terms. I looked down at my hands. They seemed solid enough, but when I wasn't directly focused on them, they blurred at the edges, like a photograph slightly out of focus. This isn't happening. This is a dream, a hallucination. Too much stress, too little sleep. You're going to wake up any minute now in your rental car, drooling on the steering wheel. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. There was a terrible clarity to everything now, as if I'd spent my whole life looking through smudged glass that had suddenly been wiped clean. I was driving home from Sheffield. The accident on the A69. Do you remember it now? My memory of the accident flashed before me in fragments sharp as broken teeth, cutting through the comfortable fog I'd been drifting in. 3 days investigating a faulty braking system for Sheffield Motors, interviewing victims' families, examining twisted metal, calculating probabilities. All I had to show for it was a stack of accident reports and interview transcripts. I'd been thinking about the case, about how many units of that model were still on the road, how many more might fail, about the cold equations that had led me to recommend against a recall. Not enough evidence to justify a recall according to the formula, just another acceptable risk threshold to present to the board on Monday. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge. My phone lit up on the passenger seat, Sarah's face on the screen, probably calling to ask when I'd be home if I'd remembered the doll. I'd reached for it, just for a second, and then the sudden glare of headlights, a truck jackknifed across the road, the sickening sensation of tyres losing grip as I swerved, the world spinning. The world stopped moving, hanging suspended in that strange calm between disaster and awareness. I was upside down, seatbelt cutting into my chest. A flash of blue and white caught my eye. Elsa, the princess doll, torn from her seatbelt and lying broken on the rain-slicked asphalt, her plastic smile unchanging as water pooled around her. My briefcase had burst open across the inverted cabin. Insurance reports, risk assessments, photographs of failed brake systems, all scattered and soaked with something darker than rain. My own blood spray painted across documents that had seemed so vital just hours before. The formulas calculating acceptable losses now stained with proof of their cold mathematics. The car radio flickered, cutting in and out with static and fragments of Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper. The irony wasn't lost on me, even as consciousness began to fade. Oil on the road, Tom said softly, fresh spill from a ruptured gasket. Ironic that. You might have investigated it yourself, had you lived. The memory struck like a physical blow. The truck that had jackknifed was from Sheffield Motors, the same company whose braking system I'd just investigated. The universe's black joke at my expense. My job was calculating risk, determining which failures were acceptable losses and which required action. Now I was one of those statistics myself. Sometimes, Tom said, refilling my glass, the risks we calculate catch up with us in unexpected ways. A strange calm was settling over me, like snowfall slowly covering a battlefield. Am I in hell? The old domino player barked a laugh like rusty machinery starting up. Hell? Lad, if you think Yorkshire's hell, you've led a charmed life. It's just a way station, Tom explained, a resting place for those who need time before moving on. Moving on where? Tom shrugged. Not my department, I just tend the bar. And you are, I asked, studying Tom more carefully. A terrible thought occurred to me. Are you... death? Tom's laugh was genuine, if rusty from disuse. Me? No, lad. Not even close. He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Even death has to delegate some burdens, you know. Too many souls, too little time. I'm just the keeper. Keeper of what? This place, the threshold. He gestured vaguely around the pub. Been here since. He hesitated, then shrugged. Plague times, if you must know. The plague? as in the Black Death, that 1349, thereabouts, he said matter-of-factly. I was the village gravedigger. When the sickness came, I buried them all. Whole families, children, babes in arms. By the end, there was no one left to dig my grave when the fever took me. I'm sorry, I said automatically. Tom's smile was wry. Long time ago now. They gave me a choice, you know. Move on or stay. Help others make the crossing. He gestured around the pub. This place, it's different for everyone who comes through, shaped by what they expect, what they need. For some it's a church, others a train station. A fellow last month saw it as an airport lounge. And you chose to stay, to help. Someone has to, he said simply. Better a familiar face than the void, isn't it? Besides, I've gotten good at it, helping people understand, accept. Outside, through the wavy glass, I could see them now, figures moving along the road, their purpose clear, though I couldn't have explained how I knew it. They had come for me. Their lanterns bobbed like fireflies in the gathering dusk, casting long shadows across the distinctive red Yorkshire clay. The nearest figure wore clothing from another century, a black greatcoat with a high collar, a flat-topped hat like Parsons wore in old photographs. The others were similarly attired, their forms softened by mist that hadn't been there minutes before. Who are they? I asked, though some part of me already knew. The wayfarers, Tom answered simply. Been walking these roads since long before your time. They help the newly departed find their way. Their way to what? Tom's eyes met mine. Acceptance, peace, whatever is needed to move on. The domino players had risen, their game abandoned. They nodded to me, solemn as judges, then filed toward the door. Were you all... I couldn't finish the sentence. Dead as Christmas turkey. Harold's laugh erupted like a car backfiring in an empty parking garage, sudden and startling and somehow lonely. Heart attack, 1962, middle of the village green. 1 minute I'm arguing with the postmaster about his dog fouling my garden. Next I'm... Face down in the daisies, Davies finished for him with a familiar nod. You've told that story 1,000 times, Harold. And you'll hear it 1,000 more, Harold snapped. Not like we've got anything but time. Mining disaster, Davies continued, turning to me. Pit explosion in 58, 19 men. Papers called it a tragedy. I called it... Piss poor safety standards, all three others recited in unison like a well-rehearsed chorus. Davies scowled. Well, it bloody well was. Fishing trawler went down off Whitby, Doyle added, absently tracing the anchor tattoo on his wrist. Storm came from nowhere. 5 of us lost. The old man simply tapped his temple. Horse through me. 1933. Nothing dramatic. And you've all been here since then? Not always here, Harold said. Sometimes we walk the road. Sometimes we're elsewhere. But we always come back to Tom's place when someone new is coming through. The bell fell silent as the door opened. Night air rushed in, neither warm nor cold against my skin. Come on, lad, Harold said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. It's time. I stood on legs that felt suddenly insubstantial. Will it hurt? Nothing hurts beyond acceptance, Tom said. Something caught my eye as he approached, something I should have noticed hours ago if it had been there to notice. A gap, almost imperceptible, between his worn leather boots and the ancient floorboards, as if gravity had a looser hold on him than on the rest of us. How had I missed that? Had his feet been firmly planted before, or had I simply seen what I expected to see? The thought sent a cold ripple through me. What else had I failed to notice? He gestured toward the door, his movement too fluid, as if his joints followed different rules than mine. The procession waits, Daniel. Best not keep them too long. My daughter, I said, halting at the threshold. She's only 7. I was driving home for her birthday. A memory surfaced, sharp as broken glass. Lily at 4, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, her small hands gripping my hair for balance. Hiya, Daddy. I want to see everything. The cotton candy smell of her breath, the weight of her tiny sneakers against my collarbone, the absolute trust in her grip. Another flash. Teaching her to ride a bike last summer, The one weekend I wasn't on the road. The determined set of her jaw, so like her mother's, as she wobbled down the driveway. "Don't let go," she'd commanded, but of course, eventually, I had to. "I promised her I wouldn't miss another one," I whispered. "I promised." Tom's face softened. "Time works different on this side. What feels like forever to you is just a blink to them." He placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt like the memory of pressure rather than pressure itself. "And Sarah," my voice cracked on my wife's name. "We argued before I left, about the job, about me always being gone. I remembered her standing in our kitchen 3 days ago, arms crossed, eyes tired. 'We need you here, Daniel, not just your paycheck, you.' The way she'd turned away when I'd reached for her, the silence as I'd loaded my suitcase into the car. I was going to tell her I'd start looking for something local, something that would keep me home. I pulled out my wallet, fumbled through it with numb fingers until I found what I was looking for, a wrinkled newspaper clipping. Local insurance adjuster position, entry level, half my current salary. I'd been carrying it for weeks, working up the... My voice broke. The paper seemed to waver in my hand, becoming transparent at the edges. "I understand," Tom said softly. "More than you can. She'll never know," I cut in, gripping the fading clipping tighter. "That I finally understood what mattered. She'll miss you. They both will. But they'll be all right." "How do you know?" I demanded, grief rising like a tide. "Because I've seen them. All of them. The ones left behind." Tom's eyes held a centuries-old compassion. "They grieve. They rebuild. They live. And someday, when their own roads straighten out, you'll be waiting." I nodded, throat tight with a grief that was somehow both fresh and ancient. The clipping in my hand had faded to near transparency, as insubstantial as smoke. I let it go, watching as it dissolved into nothing before it hit the floor. "I'm ready," I said, the words catching in my throat. Tom nodded once, a gesture of respect rather than sympathy. He reached beneath the bar and produced an old oil lantern, its flame steady behind glass blackened with the soot of centuries. "They'll be waiting for you outside." The others had already filed out, Harold, Davies, Doyle, and the old man whose name I'd never learned. Their footsteps made no sound on the wooden floor. The bell remained silent, as if it too knew this was no ordinary departure. The door stood open, revealing not the rain-lashed village street I'd seen upon entering, but a straight path cutting across moonlit moors. Figures stood in formation along it, their lanterns creating a corridor of light stretching into darkness. I took a deep breath that filled lungs that no longer needed air. The chill that had been growing inside me since I'd entered wasn't fear anymore. It was certainty. "Thank you," I said to Tom, though for what exactly I couldn't have said. His nod told me he understood anyway. "Safe journey, Daniel." I stepped outside and the procession parted to receive me, not as an observer, but as one of their own. The nearest figure, a woman in clothing 2 centuries out of date, extended her hand. I took it, feeling the peculiar coolness of her touch. We moved down the long, straight road, away from the pub that had never been a pub at all. "Don't look back," Tom called after us. His voice seemed to come from very far away. "And Daniel, walk straight." Behind us, a bell rang once more, marking the transition. I did not look back. But as we walked, I thought I felt small fingers slip into mine, warm and solid and impossibly there. When I glanced down, I saw nothing, but the pressure remained, comforting as a memory. "Daddy?" A voice like sunlight through leaves. "Is that you?" I stumbled, nearly breaking formation with the solemn procession. The other souls glanced at me, but said nothing. "Lily?" I whispered. No answer came, but the phantom grip tightened. And then, so faint I might have imagined it, the scent of strawberry shampoo and birthday cake. "You're not really here," I murmured, even as my heart raced. "You can't be." The old man with the caved-in skull turned slightly. "The young ones," the old man said quietly. "Sometimes they can sense us for a little while. In dreams, mostly. The very old too. It's like they've got one foot in both." "Worlds," I finished, feeling the small hand in mine squeeze tighter. It's her birthday today. She'd be sleeping now. Boundaries thin on important days, Harold nodded, interrupting. Birthdays, anniversaries. Deaths, added Doyle. The pressure of the small hand remained steady as we walked. Another sensation joined it, a weight against my side, as if a child was leaning into me, half asleep. I raised my free hand instinctively, as if to stroke hair I couldn't see. Will she remember this? I asked. When she wakes. Maybe as a dream, the whippet thin miner said. Maybe as a feeling. That you were there somehow. Is it real, or just what I need to believe? None of them answered. Perhaps there was no answer. But as we continued down the long, straight path, I found myself walking taller, my steps more certain. Whether Lily was truly there in some impossible way, or whether my mind had conjured her as comfort, did it matter? The love was real, the connection was real. Perhaps the dead walked straight lines, but some lines, I thought, led home.